Imagine standing at the edge of Australia's outback, a place where the horizon stretches beyond sight, where silence swallows all but the wind. Now, zoom out with me. Picture the entire continent, 7.7 million square kilometers, or nearly 3 million square miles, almost the size of the United States. Yet, as you fly over its heart, you'll notice something astonishing. Most of that land is empty. Not just rural, but truly empty. No towns, no highways, just endless open space. Here's the paradox. Australia boasts one of the world's largest territories, but more than 95% of its people are jammed along a thin coastal rim. In fact, over 85% of Australians live within 50 kilometers, or just 30 miles of the sea. That means in a nation the size of a continent, its population is packed onto a strip smaller than some American states. Why? How did a land so vast, so seemingly full of potential, end up with a hollowed-out interior? Is it just the desert heat, or something deeper? Hidden forces of geology, history, and economics shaping every choice Australians make? Let's anchor this with a single stark number. Australia's average population density is just 3.5 people per square kilometer, less than 1/10 that of the United States, and even sparser than Siberia. But if you walk into the heart of the continent, that number plummets to almost zero. There are towns so remote, the nearest neighbor is hundreds of kilometers away. And yet, the coastline pulses with life. Sydney's beaches, Melbourne's city lights, Brisbane's subtropical sprawl. Why this dynamic divide? What invisible lines have kept the centre so empty for tens of thousands of years, long before British ships ever appeared on the horizon? Here's something to ponder. Could a different history or new technology have drawn people deep into the outback? Or is the emptiness itself an essential part of Australia's identity? As we journey through this story, we'll unravel the tangled web of environment, colonization, and modern ambition. What's really behind the empty heart of a continent? And what does it mean for Australia's future? Let's step into the vast unknown and discover why 95% of Australia is empty and why that emptiness matters, not just for Australians, but for anyone fascinated by the way geography shapes the fate of nations. Let's set our boots down in the red dust of Australia's heart. The first thing that strikes you isn't just the emptiness, it's the sheer scale of it. More than half of the continent is classified as desert or semi-arid. That's over 3.7 million square kilometers, or 1.4 million square miles, an area larger than India, swallowed by sparse scrub, salt pans, and shifting dunes. Zoom in on a map and you'll see names like the Great Victoria Desert, the Gibson, the Simpson, each more forbidding than the last. The Great Victoria alone stretches 700 kilometers, or about 430 miles, from east to west. In some of these places, annual rainfall barely reaches 250 millimeters, just 10 inches. That's less than a decent summer thunderstorm in many parts of the world. But it's not just about how little rain falls, it's about how quickly the land loses what it gets. Evaporation rates in the center, they often outpace rainfall by 3, sometimes 5 times over. Imagine trying to collect water in a sieve under a furnace. That's life for anything, plant, animal, or human trying to make a living here. And the heat? Summers routinely soar above 36 degrees Celsius or 97 degrees Fahrenheit, with records leaping past 50 degrees Celsius or 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Nights can plunge cold, but the relentless sun cooks the soil into a hard crust, stripping it of nutrients. Most of the continent's interior soils are ancient, leached, and low in fertility. So poor, in fact, that only about 10% of Australia's land can support reliable agriculture. It's a landscape where crops fail more often than they flourish. This wasn't lost on the first peoples. Indigenous Australians adapted with seasonal migrations and intricate knowledge of waterholes. Later, European settlers arrived, their dreams of inland empires quickly dashed by the reality of endless dry horizons and failed crops. Consider this: if you were to drive from the lush green coast into the heart of the continent, you'd crush a dynamic threshold. Rivers disappear, trees wither, towns become rare outposts. Even today, the vast majority of Australians never see this interior firsthand. Ask yourself, what would it take to carve out a town, a farm, a life here? Why do so many attempts, from ancient times to modern schemes, stumble against the same invisible wall of climate and land? Australia's inhospitable centre wasn't just empty by accident, it's empty by design, by the relentless ancient forces of weather, geology, and time. And, as we'll see, these forces set the stage for everything that followed. Long before a single British ship appeared on the horizon, Australia's original custodians, its many Aboriginal nations, had mapped the land with knowledge deeper than any explorer's chart. They knew where water lingered, where food could be coaxed from the earth, and how to navigate the continent's vast, unforgiving spaces. But even with this intimate relationship, most indigenous groups made their homes in regions where water, plants, and animals were relatively abundant. The fertile east, the temperate southwest, and the pockets of river country that dotted the landscape. In the arid heat, populations thinned to a whisper, sometimes less than one person per 100 square kilometers, or 38 square miles. Survival here meant mobility, resilience, and a kind of patience that only thousands of generations can teach. When the British arrived in 1788, their priorities and perceptions were different, shaped by imperial ambition, maritime logistics, and a yearning for familiar green landscapes. Sydney Cove, with its sheltered harbour and reliable rainfall, became the first foothold. Coastal settlements soon followed: Hobart, Brisbane, Perth, all hugging the edge of the continent. Why the coast? The answer lies partly in the sheer difficulty of moving inland. The Blue Mountains, rising abruptly west of Sydney, formed a daunting wall. Hard rock and tangled forest that turned back expedition after expedition for decades. Even when the pathways were found, the rewards rarely justified the risks. Inland rivers dried to trickles, soils proved stubborn and infertile. The coast also meant connection. For the British, sea routes were lifelines, linking distant outposts with supplies, news, and eventually waves of migrants. Penal colonies needed ships, not camel trains. Early towns clustered where ships could anchor, where trade could flow, and where the climate felt just a little less alien. There were moments when the interior beckoned. The gold rushes of the mid-1800s dragged thousands into the bush, swelling towns like Ballarat and Bendigo overnight. Railways built with sweat and hope lashed the interior to the coast, but most of these booms faded as quickly as they arrived. Inland settlements, cut off from steady water and reliable roads, struggled to survive. The result? A deepening coastal bias, reinforced year after year. The decisions of the past, where to build, where to invest, where to dream, still shape the map today. The empty heart of Australia isn't just a product of nature, it's a legacy of choices, ambitions, and compromises that echo through every bustling city street and every silent sun-baked plain. If settlement had begun inland, would the map look different? Or did ancient geography make that impossible from the start? As we press on, consider how history's patterns still determine where life can and cannot take root. Let's look beyond the thermometer and the rain gauge. Even if you could conjure up water and shade in Australia's interior, you'd face a gauntlet of environmental hurdles that quietly but powerfully keep people away. Start with the ground beneath your feet. Most of Australia's soils are ancient, weathered for millions of years, stripped of minerals, and stubbornly resistant to farming. In places, you'll find nothing but thin, sandy crusts or salty gibber plains. Net primary productivity, a measure of how much a landscape can support, is startlingly low here, below 200 grams per square meter per year. That's a fraction of what you'd see in a temperate forest or even a prairie. Try building a thriving town, let alone a city, on that foundation. Water, the lifeblood of any community, is unreliable at best. While the Great Artesian Basin hides vast quantities of groundwater beneath the crust, tapping it is expensive and often unsustainable for anything beyond sparse cattle stations. Surface water, rivers, and lakes are seasonal, appearing only after rare rains and vanishing just as quickly. But the barriers don't end with geology and hydrology. Australia's ecological story has been upended by waves of invasive species. Foxes, cats, rabbits, and even camels brought by humans have devastated fragile ecosystems. Native animals and plants already eking out an existence on the margins have been pushed even closer to the edge. Food webs unravel, making the land even less hospitable for both wildlife and people. And then there's fire. Australia's climate has always produced bushfires, but climate change is turning up the dial. The 2019-2020 megafires, they scorched 18 million hectares, an area almost the size of Washington state, or 44 million acres, obliterating habitats, displacing communities, and sending smoke halfway around the globe. Droughts deepen, heat waves lengthen, and unpredictable weather puts even the most resilient settlements at risk. It's tempting to blame Australia's infamous wildlife for the emptiness, the snakes, the spiders, the crocs, but that's a myth. Human fatalities from animals, they're incredibly rare. The real dangers are invisible: infertile earth, vanishing water, ecological collapse, and the relentless threat of fire. So, pause and consider, what happens to a continent when its land itself pushes back against settlement? How do people adapt or retreat when nature's barriers seem to multiply with every passing decade? As we'll see, these challenges, they don't just shape who lives where, they influence how Australia's society and economy function from the ground up. Step off of the desert track and into the humming heart of Sydney or Melbourne, and you'll feel it instantly: the gravitational pull of Australia's cities. Over 2/3 of the nation's economic activity, it's packed into just 5 urban hubs, all hugging the edge of the continent. Why? Because that's where the jobs are, the roads go, and the lights stay on, reliably. Let's talk logistics. Building and maintaining infrastructure in Australia's interior is a marathon against distance and cost. Sealing a single kilometre of outback highway, well, that can cost anywhere from $200,000 to upwards of $600,000, often 2 to 3 times more than construction in temperate coastal areas. The Outback Highway, stretching roughly 2,720 kilometers, which is 1,690 miles across the continent, is a prime example. Its upgrade faces hundreds of millions in funding requirements and timelines that stretch over decades. Remote communities frequently pay far more for electricity, sometimes several times the urban rate, and grocery prices can be 40% higher than in the cities. For many, basic amenities remain a distant promise. This economic reality shapes population patterns. Industries with steady employment, finance, technology, education, healthcare, they cluster along the coast, where infrastructure and labor pools are deep. Even agriculture, the backbone of many rural economies elsewhere, is limited to a narrow band of arable land near the coast. The vast interior, it's largely the domain of mining, where billion-dollar operations extract iron ore and gold from the earth. But even here, the workforce is transient. Fly-in, fly-out workers flown from coastal cities for short stints. Few set down roots. Mining towns rise and fall with global commodity prices, never growing into the bustling regional centers imagined on maps. Urban primacy, the dominance of the top cities in national life, is a defining feature of Australia's settlement. Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide together generate over 65% of the country's GDP, while occupying less than 1/4% of the land area. Most Australians live within 50 kilometres, which is 30 miles of the coast, where the population density is highest. The vast interior remains sparsely populated, economically a blank slate. It begs the question, if building a life costs more, offers fewer jobs, and delivers less reliable services, why would anyone stay? The answer for most is that they don't. The economic engine keeps spinning on the rim, locking in that coastal pull. So, consider this. How might Australia look if it invested as heavily inland as it does along the coast? Or is the pull of the ocean and the weight of economic logic simply too strong to break? As we look ahead, these questions, they'll shape whether the outback remains empty or becomes something new entirely. So, why is 95% of Australia empty? The answers run deep, etched into ancient soils, written by waves of colonization, and reinforced by the relentless logic of economics and environment. The continent's core is a mosaic of deserts and semi-arid plains, shaped by millennia of drought, heat, and poor soil. History layered its own patterns. Aboriginal nations, they found ways to thrive on the margins, while European ambition hugged the coasts, hemmed in by both natural and psychological barriers. Modern economies, powered by cities and pulled by the promise of the sea, only sharpen that divide. But this emptiness isn't just a void, it's a living paradox, a space that holds stories of resilience, adaptation, and wild beauty. Here, the land resists easy answers. Technology and policy may shift the boundaries, but the outback's vastness remains, whispering of limits and possibilities in equal measure. What does this mean for Australia's identity? Perhaps, in part, it's about embracing the edge, the meeting place of land and sea, the delicate hinge between abundance and austerity. The challenge is to honor the lessons of the past, safeguard fragile ecosystems, and listen to indigenous knowledge that has been endured for tens of thousands of years. So, should Australians seek to rewrite the map, to fill the continent's heart with new cities and farms? Or is there wisdom in balance, in cherishing the emptiness as a counterweight to crowded coasts? These are questions not just for policymakers, but for everyone who cares about how we live with our land. Think about this. In a world where open space is vanishing fast, what is the true value of a continent-sized wilderness? Could the emptiness be Australia's greatest asset, a space for biodiversity, for ancient cultures, for the imagination to roam? As we close, I invite you to reflect. How does your own landscape shape your life and your dreams? What does it mean to belong to a place, whether it's crowded or whether it's wild? And looking forward, what kind of balance should we seek between human progress and the deep, enduring rhythms of the earth? Australia's empty heart is more than a statistic. It's a living lesson, a reminder that geography, history, and human ambition are always intertwined, shaping not just where we live, but how we understand ourselves and our place in the world.